Dimitri, I literally just saw your email. I didn't think you were going to make it. How you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm seething with righteous indignation. How you doing, Jamal?
I'm doing all right. I totally understood if you could make it. I appreciated the email. I didn't feel any particular way. You're a fantastic guest. I didn't feel any
Thank
particular
you.
way if you needed to be off. But of course, obviously, I appreciate you joining me. I really do.
My pleasure. My
Um,
pleasure.
And just so the audience would know, Dimitri Lascaris, he has a YouTube channel, Reason to Resist. He's also a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. And he is a damn good guest and even came today despite other things. So I thank you for that. I am very curious on your thoughts on what has been taking place in regards to that campaign rally that they're calling Gaza Peace Summit, where all of these weirdos show up from Europe and whatnot, some of Arab countries, pretend as if the deal has legs, and effectively allow Donald Trump to just ham it up, overlapping a literal genocide. Like people need to Donald Trump is a goofball. And so you can easily look at him and his antics and be like, God, this is stupid. But we really need to put it in context about what that stupid is sitting on top of. Now, right off the bat, the deal seems to be collapsing. Israel has limited the number of trucks that are going in already. There have been reports of people apparently either getting kidnapped by Israel or killed. Those are rumors, so I'm not going to put too much hard part in that part, but the trucks, Al Jazeera is reporting that the trucks have been limited. Apparently Hamas gave people or dead bodies that they couldn't, according to Israel, associate the names associated with it. And then it's like, okay, well, why would they give you just random dead bodies? What would be the motivation to do that? What are they thinking? That they have hostages somewhere and they're just holding the hostages and giving you a dead body of somebody else? What it sounds like is that when Israel did all that bombing, that a lot of those bodies were under the rubble, that they may not have access to those bodies. But give me your take on this. I mean, you can start wherever you want to with it, but I am curious on your overall general take.
Well, just with respect to this festival of depravity in Egypt, just look at the list of attendees. They are all representatives of Western governments and vassals of Washington and the Arab and Muslim world. And this is just a continuation of that theater that began in New York City a couple of months ago, where they came out with this thing called the New York Declaration, and they pretended to care about a Palestinian state while doing nothing to hold Israel accountable. And that was co-hosted by France and Saudi Arabia. This one, I mean, that tells you all you need to know about that conference. This one was hosted by Egypt and I think the United States. I mean, come on. These are parties that are, complicit, if not outright committing genocide in Gaza. And the people who attended this grotesque display of, betrayal of the Palestinian people were the same characters who were in the New York Declaration. So they are demanding, that the Palestinians disarm, even though they have a right to take up armed resistance against their oppressor, a legal and moral right. And it is an obscenity. It's an obscenity to demand that the victims of a genocide disarm while the perpetrator of the genocide remains armed to the teeth. I mean, no person of conscience would think that that is a fair or appropriate demand. And that is what all of these characters who are participating in both of these spectacles are demanding of the Palestinian resistance, not just Hamas. Let's be very clear. They're demanding that all resistance groups disarm. And they're also demanding that the redevelopment, reconstruction of Gaza and the future governance of Gaza be subjected to foreign supervision. And the character they've trotted out, the two depraved characters to lead this initiative, this governance initiative, the Peace Board, are Trump, the psychopathic mass murderer, and Tony Blair, another psychopathic mass murderer. This tells you all you need to know about what this is designed to do. This is designed to entrench and render permanent the subjugation and humiliation of the Palestinian people and the occupation. Where we go from here, Jamal, look, the Israeli media itself, these are not rumors. The Israeli media itself, quoting Israeli government officials, say that they are restricting the introduction of humanitarian aid on the basis that Hamas has not provided sufficient and timely information about dead Israeli detainees in the Gaza Strip, probably who were killed by Israel itself. And why anyone would think that this is possible for Hamas to do, or any resistance group to do, within a short period of time, given the devastation in Gaza, is a mystery. Of course, this is a challenge, and they were told by the resistance groups weeks ago that identifying these dead detainees and turning their remains over was going to be an immense challenge, and that it could not be done within the time frame being demanded by them. And I want to remind people that in, I think it was March, Israel used exactly the same excuse to restrict the introduction of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip under the first ceasefire agreement negotiated under the Trump regime, which was concluded in January. What they said at the time in March was, "Oh, those nasty Palestinians are not giving us timely and sufficient information about Israeli detainees who have been killed. Therefore, we're going to restrict humanitarian aid." So we've seen this show before, and I mean, we can get into it if you want. I think it's probably useful for us to talk about the actual terms of the agreement that was signed on October 3rd. But all of the fundamentally important issues that have led to the subjugation and oppression of the Palestinian people are unaddressed by that agreement. There's no timeline for addressing them. There's not even a commitment by Israel to negotiate in good faith with a view to addressing those issues. So I think the writing is on the wall.
So just to make your point very clear, Al Jazeera reporting live on this. Israel Army continues sporadic attacks on Palestinians despite the ceasefire. A team on the ground report. Its health ministry reports more killed in the last day. Deal validated. Immediately validated. Here's another one. Hamas has handed over bodies of 4 more Israelis to the Red Cross, bringing the number of released or deceased captives to 8. 3 bodies have been identified by the family, while Israeli army says a 4th doesn't match the records. And because of that, Israel says that only half agreed number of aid trucks into Gaza, and they have delayed opening the Rafah crossing. And as why? Slow release of dead captives. Think about that. So Trump goes, parades about, signs some document, apparently with other Arab leaders who also signed the document, who are supposed to be signatories to the document. And within one day, 24 hours, Israel says it's only going to give half of the aid trucks. That's amazing. And not just that, Israel continues to sporadically attack Palestinians despite the ceasefire. And they've killed more people in the last 24 hours that Trump has signed the deal. That's amazing. It seems that it just seems that what they want is to get through this deal, but they couldn't get militarily on the ground. This feels like a trap to me. Give me your take. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're absolutely correct. Absolutely, that's all this is. This is a theater designed to achieve, they're trying to put on the Palestinian people through their various vassals in the region, principally Erdogan and Sisi, the dictator of Egypt, the person whom Trump referred to as his favorite dictator. Let's remember that, okay? That's coming from the mainstream press. That ain't a rumor. So the thing I want to stress here, Jamal, is that it don't matter as a matter of international law and as a matter of basic human decency, even if the Israelis are telling the truth, that Hamas is withholding information about the dead Israelis, many of whom were probably killed by Israel, maybe all of whom were killed by Israel, in a timely manner. It doesn't matter, because as a matter of international law, Israel, as the occupier, has an obligation to provide sufficient humanitarian aid to the civilian population of Gaza to sustain the population in a healthy condition. And in fact, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, confirmed as much in a ruling last year, where it said that the occupation is illegal. It's illegal, and Israel has an obligation to bring it to an end as quickly as humanly possible, and must introduce sufficient humanitarian aid as an occupier to the Palestinian people. So it don't matter one goddamn iota what the Hamas is providing in terms of information to Israelis about dead Israeli prisoners in Gaza. They still have an obligation as a matter of law and as a matter of basic human decency to provide the humanitarian aid. Why should the children of Gaza be starved because some people with, I mean, again, I'm assuming that the Israelis are telling the truth, okay, which is a huge assumption. I'm being very generous to them. Let's say
It
that
is.
Hamas is not giving all the information, okay, about the dead Israeli prisoners. Why should the children of Gaza be deprived of essential medicine and food because of that? What kind of a monster thinks that way? Come on, man. The whole dialogue in the West around this, controversy, the provision of information to Israel about dead Israeli prisoners, is perverted. It's depraved. No, they have an obligation to support the civilian population no matter what.
Yeah, let's get into the deal because you're right. For one, I didn't even realize that. I know they said 20 points, but the only point that they seem to have agreed upon was release of hostages. Israel apparently stays in the region an indeterminate amount of time at some location, remaining in Gaza, keeping the military in Gaza. Food trucks are supposed to be sent through. I think it was 600 or 800. You could correct me on which number that is. I think it was 600 because that's like the bare minimum. Yeah, that's the bare minimum. And Trump is already screaming, Hamas needs to disarm, or else we will do it violently. This is 24 hours.
Yeah.
Step into it for me.
So there was an interesting scrum, as we call it, a press scrum on the presidential aircraft. I think it was when Trump was flying to West Asia from Washington on Sunday, right? Mm-hmm. Where he was asked about the fact that Hamas appears to be rearming. That's what the so-called journalist asked him. What do you think of that? And, she specifically mentioned the fact that Hamas is carrying out what could be described as police operations against collaborators who were armed by Israel and who were stealing humanitarian aid. And he said, we gave them approval for a brief period of time, and, we're okay with that. They've got to secure the thing. He said nothing at that point about Hamas having to disarm. It wasn't the 20-point peace plan, but at that moment when they were on the verge of releasing the Israeli prisoners, he said nothing about Hamas having to disarm. As soon as Israel got its hands on those prisoners of war, which is what they are, then he says they must disarm, and if they don't do it, we might have to disarm them by means of violence. It's been clear all along. The Palestinians have never been shy about saying this. They ain't going to disarm. And like I said, it's an obscenity to expect them to give up their light weapons when the perpetrator of the genocide against them is armed to the teeth. So this was not a surprise. What Trump has done is he waited for the Israeli POWs to be handed over, and he immediately showed his true face. He intends to greenlight, not only greenlight, but enable the continuation of this genocide. We all, I'm sure you understood that this was a risk. We all understood this was risk. Nobody understood better than the Palestinians that this was a risk. And sure enough, the risk has materialized. So where does this leave us? This leaves us back to where we were before this prisoner exchange, which is to say that we as people of conscience have to escalate the pressure on this genocidal maniac, Trump and his proxy Israel, to put an end to the slaughter. And I think even the fact that they gave up, the positive, I think, note about all of this is the fact that they gave up 2,000 Palestinian hostages, 250 of whom had been sentenced to life sentences by, Israel's kangaroo military racist courts, whose judges are war criminals. Okay, that's what they are. The fact that they gave up 2,000 shows that they are feeling pressure. They are definitely feeling pressure. The fact that they at least, de-escalated the killing and increased the humanitarian aid shows that they're feeling pressure, but clearly it ain't enough. We have to escalate, and people should not fall into a state of complacency at this stage. We are winning. I know it's hard to see that, but these people are feeling increasingly threatened. I believe that the Zionist lobby is in a state of alarm because of the public opinion polls that are coming out of the United States and other Western countries. And we just have to keep doing what we're doing and do more of it and be more persistent. And eventually they will be forced to bring an end to the slaughter, but I don't think we're there yet.
So Israel Katz, ironically named, came out, said the quiet part out loud, put this out right here. Israel's greatest challenge after the phase of returning of the hostages will be the destruction of all Hamas terror tunnels in Gaza directly by the IDF and through the international mechanism to be established under the leadership and supervision of the United States. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means you're staying in Gaza, right? You are effectively still going to continue your campaign once you get the hostages back, meaning we got our hostages back. Now we could go back to doing this at the point where we rearm and reload. It says this is primary significance of implementing the agreed upon principle of demilitarizing Gaza and neutralizing Hamas and weapons. And I think what people need to realize, I felt conflicted about this deal the entire time. And I think you hit it on the head. Hamas has a right as a resistance group to resist occupation, period. What the deal is trying to effectively do is say, well, if Hamas resists this occupation, which they have a right to, then they would have violated the deal. This entire deal is weighted in a very particular direction that would allow Israel to, of course, commit killings and everything else without any of these, let's say, signatories are really saying or doing anything. In fact, one of the things that the reporting showed was that they were thinking, hey, who's going to rebuild this? Who's going to create the mechanism by which we have the peacekeepers, quote unquote, on the ground? Meaning they signed a document and none of this stuff was worked out. None of this stuff was thought out. The Palestinians really didn't have any say in any of it. Like, this seems to be a deal that was obviously set up and designed to fail.
Well, it was designed to secure the release of 20
Yes.
prisoners of war, but Israel paid a price for that. It gave up 2,000 Palestinian hostages. Now there are thousands more remaining in those, as B'Tselem calls them, those torture camps. And we can't forget that, not for 1 second. But there was an exchange. The Palestinians definitely got the better of the exchange. 2,000 hostages compared to 20 prisoners of war. As there's nothing in this one pager, which I'm sure you've read. I've talked about it many times on my program about disarmament. There's not a word. Right. There's not a word about this stupid ass peace board led by these psychopaths, Trump and Blair. There's nothing in there about Hamas, leaders going into exile. There's nothing in there about a permanent Israeli military presence in the Gaza Strip. So all of that was left unaddressed. If you were in a court of law and you were trying to interpret what that one-page agreement means, you would look. What courts would do in the United States and Canada and other countries is they would look at the context, and the context was there was a 20-point peace plan put forward, a so-called peace plan, which demanded that Hamas disarm, and demanded that they agree to the creation of this peace board and foreign governance of Gaza, that's nowhere to be seen in this one pager. So the clear inference is that Hamas agreed to no such thing. Now, right. It's true that Israel didn't agree to allow them to have arms either. That question was punted. But again, when Trump was on that airplane, hours before the POWs were released to Israel, he was asked about whether or not this was going to lead to a permanent peace. And he said, I've received guarantees. I have ironclad guarantees, and people aren't going to want to piss me off. So he was implying at the moment when, the Palestinians were having to make the final decision about whether to give up these prisoners of war, that he had been told that Israel would withdraw. He had been told that Israel was going to stop the war on Gaza. In fact, he said unequivocally in that interview, he looked at a journalist who asked him, he said, listen to me. The war is over. That's what he said. He was being definitive. All of this was hours before the Palestinians gave up the hostages. Like the shyster that he is, the real estate scam artist, con artist, carnival barker that he is, Donald Trump pulled another scam. That's what's happened here. But as I say, they are feeling the heat. And it's not as though the Palestinians have no leverage. They still have their weapons. And Israel is in a mess. Its army is exhausted and demoralized. And let us hope that it doesn't revive. But if this war continues, the Israelis are going to discover that they cannot defeat the resistance. They simply cannot defeat it by military means. And they're going to pay a heavy price. And the question that we as civil society must ask ourselves is, how many civilians are we going to allow these monsters to massacre before we say enough? That's the question. Israel will lose this war. Make no mistake. Israel is the most detested nation on earth. The Palestinian people will have freedom. But how many people will we allow them to murder before that day of liberation comes?
Dimitri, that fool said, for the first time in 3,000 years, there's peace, and it's going to remain that way. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. You are awesome, man. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. I thank you greatly, immensely. Dimitri Lascaris, host Reason to Resist on YouTube. You can check him out. Also, journalist, activist, and lawyer, Montreal, Quebec. You be safe, man. Thank you for this, Dimitri.
Peace out. Take care, everybody.
Have a good one. Bye-bye. All right. Shout out to Dimitri. Shout out to